Welcome to Gaia's Love, a podcast of brief messages to help humanity bridge the gap to the new earth. My name is Vivienne Gerard. It is my delight to be a scribe for consciousness today, sharing the wisdom that flows through from Source. Here we go. Episode 162. It is Tuesday here in Cincinnati. Gorgeous, sunny. The rain has moved through and we have a few days ahead of us of sunshine. So it's going to be yard work afternoon. Time to dig in the dirt and look at all that is coming up out of the ground. It's a little chilly, but overall just a beautiful day. Yeah, Tuesday. So when I was preparing for the podcast today, this title of Promises came forward, and I was reminded of a book that I read. It was probably one of my first romance novels when I was young. I don't know, maybe I was 6th or 7th grade, maybe a little older, 8th grade, when I read it. And it's a novel by Danielle Steele called The Promise. And it was one of the first really big, thick novels that I read where you get into the characters and they feel so real and you have this identification with the story. So in case you haven't read the book, this may be a spoiler. So if you want to read the book, turn it off and read the book and then come back. But if you don't care about knowing the ending, I'm just going to share it because the ending is so relevant. In the story, the way I remember it, and I haven't picked the book up in a long time. I think I found it, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years ago. I don't remember. I found it and I read through it and it was just as good as I remembered, which is really impressive for a book to hold its power that long. But in the book, this young couple, fall in love and make this commitment to each other, and they have these rings that they exchange and they bury them under a big, huge tree and have this beautiful promise to each other of who they're going to be in their lives. And then stuff happens and they aren't together and they end up, going in different directions. And the story follows each of them and their loss and their pain in being separated. And then eventually they find their way back to this tree and the rings that are still there and just have this incredible moment. It's just such a pure, beautiful love story, the kind that movies are made of. As I'm saying all this, I'm thinking about Sweet Home Alabama. It kind of has the same storyline. And what was the other one that just flashed to my mind? Oh, it's gone now. But there are several stories that have this. The lake one, Lake House. The Lake House has that same sort of feeling, except they play with time in that one in a different way. But the whole premise is we have these promises that we make for grand love, and then life gets in the way. And as I was thinking about that today, I'm still so present in this energy of Libra and partnerships and sacred agreements. And I believe when we make our promises as souls before we come down into these human adventures, journeys, tortures, I don't know, whatever title you give to the human journey, when we're souls and we are making all of these promises to each other, we have this pure intention, pure optimism, this absolute conviction that what we see and know to be true as souls, we can absolutely manifest in the human journey, and that we can set our intentions for the highest experience, the highest level of the experience, and of course it will be exactly that. Then when we're down here on earth, down here, up here, sideways, however you get into earth, when we're here on earth, it's like, wait a second, right? You promised me this and now you're showing up as this. Or We made these promises to be together, and now we're not together. Or, we made these promises for these futures, and now here we are in these realities. And so there's a sense of disillusionment or disgust, frustration, depends on how far you are into the betrayal of the promise not being fulfilled. We get very attached to it. Doesn't look and feel like how we know in the core of who we are it's supposed to look and feel. Because there is always this truth or this resonance inside of our human experience that is the soul in its purest form. And the soul knows when we're not in full alignment or full integrity, or the vision we were holding as a soul isn't quite complete yet or manifested yet. There's always this knowing inside of us. And the human experience of it can be so annoying. Maybe that's the best word. It can be so annoying because it just doesn't match what that soul expression knows that it can be. And I say that for our relationship with ourselves as well as our relationship for those people around us. And so the hope, or what would the word be? The clarity that I would offer for us to explore, each of us individually, is what is that knowing that is in the center of us that we need to keep coming back to. In the book, The Promise, what I loved so much about the story is how, because they had experienced that feeling of unity as a young couple, because they had felt what it felt like to be in that pure vibration of love and commitment, everything that wasn't that in the rest of their journey, they knew that it wasn't matching what they had originally once felt. They just knew it. And so they finally gave up on the stuff that wasn't working to go back to that dream of what was actually possible, because they had felt it, they had experienced it. And so when they found their way back to that tree, and I know this is a very romanticized story, but it it explains the point beautifully in my mind. When they found their way back to that tree, they were reminded that what they knew had been true was true. And they were both different individuals for their journeys that they'd experienced, but the love, the connection was as true years later as it was when they first felt it. Perhaps even more so, even strengthened or deepened. When we feel that sense of being annoyed that things aren't living up to what we thought, or the relationships aren't exactly the way we pictured they would be, or the other person isn't showing up in the way that we want them to show up, the invitation is to come back to that pure knowing of what the promises were in their highest expression. Come back to that knowing within yourself. Right? So for me, coming back to that knowing that when I agreed to come have this human journey, I agreed I would show up always as my best self, as much as possible. That I would show up with an open heart, that I would show up with compassion and with kindness, and that I would keep coming back to that. Even when I get frustrated, even when I get annoyed, even when people aren't what I hope they're going to be, or show up in the way I want them to. That's not the point. The point is, am I showing up? Am I fulfilling my promise? Because the more consistently I do that for myself, the more I radiate that consistency out into all the relationships around me. And then if I'm showing up as me over and over and over again, the best version of me I can hold or maintain for as long a period as possible, then there's an invitation for others to match that vibration. And my work is to let go of the attachment to it, or to let go of the expectation that they have to do something that isn't in alignment for them. My my work is to be me, not to monitor all the people around me and see if they're doing what they're supposed to be doing. My work is to show up for myself in my best possible way and keep coming back to that vibration, that promise, that truth of who I know I am. And I fail. I flunk out all the time. I mean, I do. My children, my pet, my partner, oh, many people will tell you I suck often at being the best version of myself. And yet my commitment to keep coming back, to tuning back into that resonance, it keeps me in alignment with fulfilling the promise I made to myself, and then being able to experience the promises that I made with so many people around me. And then my intention is I can hold the vibration of my highest, best version of myself for longer and longer periods, and then others are matching me in that same vibration, and eventually, one day, we're all just always going to be at our best. And we're all just always going to be pure love and pure consciousness, just connecting in this physical human journey. We will all be back at that tree, like in the book, unburying the rings that we had buried and making these beautiful exchanges that we are richer and better for because of all the density that we've gone through between when the promise was made and when the promise is fulfilled. So, yeah, I guess call me a romantic, call me an optimist. I don't know, it works for me. It's a beautiful way to hold my vibration as steady as possible, and then allow myself to show up for others in my best expression. So, yeah, I guess I'm going to look for the book again and reread it, because now I want to remember all the mess they went through in the middle. So good. So good. I am headed outside to enjoy some sunshine and some dirt in my fingernails. Spring is arriving. Thank you for tuning into this vibration of pure love. I invite you to join me in aligning with the optimal health of your mind, body, spirit in the virtual community of Viv's Energy Gym. You can learn more at mysouljourney.com. Let's take this message of Gaia's love out into all of our relationships and communities today. So much love from my heart to yours.